Hello everybody and welcome to another one of our leadership training videos. Now in this particular one, I'm going to just explain a little bit about my background and my history, because several of you have asked and said, well, I've done all these leadership training videos and shared with you and explained to you what my 35 years experience has shown me across the various different markets where I've worked, which are primarily 5 markets, and also Europe, Middle East and Africa. But I've been asked the question, okay, that's great, but what about you? Where did you start? How did that all come together in terms of leadership? So I'm going to share a few minutes with you to kind of set the scene, as it were. I guess on the one hand, one of the questions which I know is often asked, and I addressed this in one of the previous leadership training videos about how to become more effective, how to become more of a leader, the leadership traits, qualities and skills that you need. And one of the questions that I addressed, at least in my own way, is whether leaders are born or whether leaders are created. That's often been a big conversation, a big discussion. And to be honest, to make it simple, there's a camp that says leaders are born, and there is a camp that says leaders are made. It's up to you to make up your own mind. But in my own journey, if you like, I guess I'll talk to you about the corporate world in a minute, which is where my real leadership skills started to come through. But when I started, I understood and knew that there were just different things that I wanted to do myself in leading teams, groups, individuals. So as a couple of examples, I was a scout leader. If those of you who are familiar with the scout movement, the scout system. So I was a patrol leader in the scouts when I was about 14, 15. And I did that for maybe 3 years. So I started, I think, at about the age of 13, right the way through to 16. So that was one area where I was given this opportunity and told, you can lead that team. We were always the best, by the way. We were always the best patrol in that particular group. Different story for a different day. And when I was at the international school in Geneva, we wanted to go on a football tournament, which, to be honest, we'd never done. The school had never been on a football tournament. And I thought, because I was in a football team anyway, well, let's do it. Let's go for it. I spoke to the head teacher, and we decided that we would get this together. Now, at the end of the day, we hadn't got the funds. It was the middle of the year. Nothing had been planned. And I said, don't worry, we'll take care of it. So I just moved everything I had to, co-opted people, individuals, got parents involved, got the school involved, and we went to Munich. And in that first year, we actually won the European International School, Southern European International Schools Championship. So I guess to a degree, I had some of that character in me. But then let's go forward. So in terms of where I started in my work, I was working on a project in Scotland, on the west coast of Scotland, a place called Greenock. And it was going to be IBM's first European PC factory. It was a really big deal. The site had been selected by the then global CEO, never met him, and that was where it was going to be. Now, I was working at the time for a company called Robert Matthew Johnson Marshall and Partners, RMJM, and we were civil and structural engineering consultants, because I qualified as a civil engineer at university. And this opportunity came up to work on the site. I was going to be what we call an assistant resident engineer. So somebody more senior than me was going to be looking after the site, looking after the contractors, making sure the building was built according to specification, to code, and of course, within the budgets, to make it very simple. It was a big factory, big deal, really big project. I did this, in fact, I got promoted to resident engineer because the engineer that was there at the time, I guess he decided that give a youngster something to do. Maybe he saw the leadership qualities in me. And it was on the west coast and I lived on the east coast in Edinburgh. So Greenock, south of Glasgow, Edinburgh where I lived. So I went over during the week, stayed there all the time, and then came back at the weekend. And my boss at the time, for whatever reason, gave me the role of looking after that site. So being in the middle of the main contractor, the subcontractors, the client, and the designers, architects, engineers, etc. So it was fascinating. Got a lot of experience from it. And then I was due to leave probably about 18 months after the project had been going on. And that's when a big problem hit. I was literally about to leave the site a few days later. I was being called back to my head office, and basically that was, it was going to be finished off by somebody else. And on that day, the dual carriageway, the motorway, just above where the project was, because the project was just below, and then just above it was the dual carriageway that ran, so you could see the site from the dual carriageway. And then lo and behold, one major part of the dual carriageway collapsed, literally collapsed. So you could see on the hillside this huge gouge in the side, and as the road continued, one of them was fine. This was, as you can imagine, going to be a major, major disaster. As I said, I was due to leave site, and IBM said no. They wanted me to stay on site. They wanted me to manage the project going forward in terms of who does what and when and how and everything else. And in so doing, I experienced an opportunity not only to understand the dynamics and the issues that were going on within the site, but also to keep essentially two very big, and I would say warring factions, between IBM as the client, who had an attitude of whatever it takes, get it done, we'll figure out who did it wrong later on. And on the other side, you had one of the UK's major construction companies that was building the site. Long story short, because it was a very long and very complex situation, on the one hand, when the client says, I want it done, I don't care what it's going to cost. It wasn't about cost. I mean, they said, because the cost had to be looked at later on, but basically they said, look, this needs to be done and finished on time and opened, and we'll figure out the legal responsibilities and everything else that was happening in relation to that. For me, it was just an amazing opportunity. I was honored, privileged. I didn't know why IBM had selected me, apart from the fact that they said that they had watched me over the previous 18 months, how I'd managed the site meetings, managed the contractors, managed the subcontractors, managed the design process and everything else that goes with it. And they felt that I was competent at the young, tender age of about 25. I was about 25 years old when this happened. And so for me, it was like, wow, this is phenomenal. This is an amazing opportunity for me to learn, to grow, to experience. And it wasn't just about the site, because on that dual carriageway, as you can imagine, the highway authorities, the police, the urban planners, the designers and architects, local MPs and officials all got involved, because A, IBM was going to make a significant contribution to that area, but secondly, it was going to be a case of who is responsible, how did this happen, and how do we deal with it? And of course, the first priority was to make safe the dual carriageway whilst the rest was being continued and being built. So that's where I cut my teeth on leadership, and knowing what those moments are where you have to find out not only the fact that there is a problem, so where did the problem originate from? How do you deal with it? What's the solution? But more importantly, as far as the client in this case was concerned, this project needs to get completed. It needs to get done. And to be able to achieve that, you then have to say, okay, somebody's responsible, somebody's liable, there's going to be an additional cost to it, and all those things have to be worked out through inevitably a legal process. But the main vision, the main focus for everybody, and I talk about this in leadership, is just, I brought the team together and basically said, we have to figure a way to get this done, and here's how we do it. So together we figured out the steps necessary to go forward. Now, in the end, I didn't stay the whole time, because I was called back to head office anyway at a certain time, and then honestly I moved on to another company a short while later, because I had an opportunity that came my way. So that's where my leadership training, skill, ability, the interaction between human beings, the fact that everybody defends their position at a certain time, because that's what we often do when there are problems, as opposed to saying, okay, here's an issue, how do we solve it, how do we deal with it, and let's find a way to make this successful for everybody. We understand the problems, but there's a solution on the other side. So that's where my journey, at least in the business world, started, within Robert Matthews, Johnson, Marshall and Partners, or RMJM as they later became known, as designers of civil engineering and structural engineering projects, and then really moving forward. And from there, that's where my journey began, and that's where I've been able to not only cut my teeth on different types of leadership, but also understand, learn, and grow. And I read a lot. I read a lot of books about leadership and what it takes to be a successful leader. So that's why I'm sharing it with you. So I hope that this has left you with not only an understanding of all the leadership training videos you may have looked at and said, okay, where did this all begin? Because I never really told the story, but more importantly, it's a journey. It's a journey for all of us. So wherever you are, a beginner, well down the track, or you've had many and successful leadership roles, whether you run your own business and your own company, whether it's your family environment, or whether you're the CEO or chairman of a major corporation, or indeed president or prime minister of any country. It's just the fact that all the steps are necessary to get to a point of being able to deliver strong leadership skills, understanding what is needed, and also managing yourself, leading yourself as well, because leadership is not just about what's out there, it's about what's inside as well. So I hope this has left you with some thoughts and ideas. Please feel free to share, like, comment, and subscribe to this video channel, and then you'll understand when other videos are becoming available. So until we speak again, thank you.